Okay, so fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps.
Hmm.
I mean, that's Bob Camblin right there, throwing out a line that just makes you stop and think.
Yeah, makes you wonder what he meant.
It does. And that's what we're diving into today, the world and work of Bob Camblin.
This is gonna be fun.
He's an artist who's definitely gotten recognition, but there's also this really interesting, mysterious quality about him and his work,
Yeah, a bit of an enigma.
right? And we've got a lot to work with here, his own writings, some biographical info, and people who have really thought deeply about his art.
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive picture.
It is, and as always, we're here to sort of pull out the most interesting and important stuff for you.
Makes sense of it all.
Exactly. Think of this as like the express lane to really understanding Bob Camblin. We're going for those aha moments and definitely not information overload.
I like it. So where do we start?
Well, the first thing that really jumps out is Camblin, the man himself.
Okay.
He wasn't someone who just stuck to one thing.
Yeah.
You know, he worked in oils, watercolors, drawings, even painted paper.
Wow, a real experimenter.
He was, and he had this whole career teaching at different universities, but then he makes this pretty radical shift to a nomadic life completely dedicated to his art.
That's a huge change.
It is, and this deep dive is all about connecting those dots in his artistic journey. And we'll be using the book Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, which features his drawings and reflections as a kind of key guide.
Okay, so that'll be our roadmap through this world.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
let's start with the basics. Bob Camblin, born in Oklahoma in 1928.
Oklahoma, okay.
And it seems like his passion for art really ignited when he was studying at the Kansas City Art Institute.
Got it.
His talent was obvious from early on, and that actually led to a really pivotal experience, a Fulbright scholarship to Italy.
Ah, that must have been huge.
It was. This trip to Europe seems to have been a major turning point in how he saw the world and how he saw art.
You can imagine being immersed in that kind of environment.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
being in Europe exposed him to this incredible sweep of art history, I mean, from the Renaissance masters to the Impressionists.
Wow, just imagine.
And he spent a lot of time at the Uffizi Gallery just taking in all that classical brilliance.
Yeah, that would leave a mark.
It would. But you know what's really interesting is this visit he made to the Capuchin catacombs in Palermo.
The catacombs.
Yeah, these underground tunnels with all these preserved bodies, you know, almost abstract in a way.
Oh, wow.
He referred to them in his mind as mummies. And it's striking because that imagery, those figures caught between life and death, it reappears in his later work.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's like those early visual experiences really embedded themselves in his artistic language.
Yeah, almost like planting these seeds that would grow later on.
That makes sense.
Okay, so before he fully embraced the nomadic life, Camblin had a more traditional path. He was a map maker for TWA for a while.
A map maker. That's so interesting.
It is, right? Visualizing spaces and boundaries.
Yeah, I see the connection.
And then he spent a good chunk of his life teaching art at a bunch of different universities. The Ringling School of Art, the University of Illinois, later on Rice University.
So he was rooted in academia for a while?
He was. But even within that structure, his Oklahoma roots is upbringing in Ponca City. It's there in his work.
Okay, how so?
Well, you see these subtle echoes of his upbringing, like the Marlin Estate, this grand mansion from the oil boom era, and the Pioneer Woman statue, these landmarks from his childhood landscape.
I see.
And there's also this personal layer. His mother, Viva Camblin, seems to have been a kind of pioneer woman figure for him, which is maybe why we see that VV shorthand in some of his pieces.
Oh, that's a nice connection.
It is. And we can't forget the power of film, The Wizard of Oz, with those fantastic visuals and the whole journey narrative. It must have made a lasting impression.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Wizard of Oz is timeless.
It is. So it wasn't just places, though. Relationships were also crucial.
Hmm.
His friendship with Forrest Harrisberger from high school.
Oh, wow, from high school.
Yeah, they stayed connected throughout his life. And art was this fundamental part of their bond. They even sketched the California coastline together during their military service.
That's really cool.
Is that shared experience.
Yeah.
And speaking of influences, Camblin was a voracious reader.
Okay, what kind of stuff was he into?
I mean, all over the place. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the I Ching, and then the succinct but deep insights of haiku and haiga.
So drawn to those like short bursts of meaning.
Exactly. It suggests this mind that's constantly searching for meaning and connection and trying to express it.
I can see how haiku and haiga with that combination of image and words would resonate with his artistic approach.
Yeah, that's striving for essence.
Right.
Okay, so we're starting to get a sense of the young Camblin soaking up all these influences. Now let's dive into his artistic philosophy and how his style evolved.
Okay, let's do it.
One thing that's really clear is that his art aimed to transcend traditional criticism and those commercial interests.
Hmm, interesting.
He wanted a direct connection with the viewer.
So not creating for the art market or critics?
No, not really. His early works often tackled social protest themes, and they were marked by strong outlines and flat areas of color.
Okay, I can picture that.
But then there's this really interesting shift in his mid-career. He starts to blend social realism, that style focused on everyday life and social issues, with non-objectivity, which is art that doesn't depict recognizable things.
So a mix of the real and the abstract.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is his ambition here. He's trying to depict the subjective world of human symbols, the underlying meanings we attach to things.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is. And you can see the influence of artists like Cremoni, known for his powerful drawings, and those expressive Etruscan terracotta figures.
Okay, so it's drawing on different traditions.
Yeah, and this evolution didn't stop there.
Hmm.
He moves more and more towards drawing as a primary art form, creating these large-scale pieces that really stand alongside paintings.
Interesting.
And what's cool is that he often incorporated corrections right into the work, almost making the artistic process visible.
Like those changes become part of the story.
Exactly. And in the 1960s, he's consciously trying to bring together these different strands he's drawn to. The poetic suggestions of Hugo van der Goes, that Northern Renaissance master, known for emotional intensity and the raw emotional power of Goya.
That's a wild combination.
It is. The delicate and the dramatic.
I see it.
And then in the 1980s, we see the Mouches Volantes style emerge, which was a collaboration with Nancy Giordano.
Mouches
He
volante.
means flying flies in French and refers to those tiny specks you sometimes see in your vision.
Oh, yeah, I know those.
So their style used dots and dashes to create these optical illusions, really pulling the viewer in.
Oh, wow, so it's interactive.
It is. It's not just a visual trick. It's about making the viewer an active participant in how the image comes together.
I can see the Zen influence there.
Definitely. And even later in his career, we see this continued mastery of technique and symbolic depth. Works like the Big Al series and Descent from the Cross.
So a real evolution over his career.
Exactly. It paints this picture of an artist who never stopped experimenting and pushing his own boundaries.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into some of those recurring themes that you mentioned.
Okay, perfect. One that's really prominent is metamorphosis in the life cycle.
Okay.
You see it most clearly in his work from the 1970s.
Hmm.
All these images of puppets, scarecrows, lobster shells, empty larva shells.
Interesting. A lot of transformation there.
Right. It's hard not to see the connection to writers like Nikos Kazantzakis and Günter Grass, who also explored these themes of transformation and those big existential journeys.
Yeah, and those themes aren't just in art, they're in our lives too.
Absolutely. This idea of constant change and evolution and this fascination with change, it connects to another key theme, illusions and perception.
Okay, how so?
Well, the Mouches Volantes style is a great example, but it goes beyond that. He incorporates these ideas of traps and hidden meanings within his drawings, constantly questioning what's real and what's perceived.
It's like he's playing with our sense of reality.
He is. It's not quite surrealism, but it shares that interest in messing with our expectations.
Yeah, making us look closer.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to be drawing a distinction between just looking and truly seeing.
Which is something we all grapple with, right?
We do. Navigating a complex world where things aren't always what they seem.
Absolutely.
And speaking of things not being what they seem, paradox and ambiguity, those are central to his work.
Okay.
We have this book review that talks about paradoxes made visible, a trap that does not trap, riddles disguised as structures.
Riddles.
Yeah, and it even compares his work to Zen koans.
Like those paradoxical sayings that are meant to make you think.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is this idea that the more closely you look at his work, the more ambiguous it becomes.
So he's layering these complexities on purpose.
I think so.
Yeah.
He's inviting us to engage on a deeper level.
That makes sense.
And this sense of deeper engagement, it's also reflected in his approach to collaboration.
Okay, tell me more.
So he had these really close working relationships with artists like Earl Staley and Joe Tate. They worked together under the names B&E Productions and the holding firm.
Interesting. So it wasn't always just him working alone.
Right. And their focus seems to have been on the creative process itself, sometimes even more than the final artwork.
So prioritizing exploration over product.
Exactly. And connected to this collaborative spirit is his use of anonymity.
Anonymity.
Yeah, sometimes he would sign works as anonymous or anonymous artists.
Huh, that's interesting. Why do you think he did that?
It's a good question. It really challenges that traditional idea of the individual artistic ego.
Like he's downplaying his own role.
Yeah, maybe it was a way to detach himself from the outcome or to emphasize a kind of shared creative energy.
I wonder.
It makes you think. And another really interesting aspect is the role of text in his art.
Okay, I'm curious about that.
It wasn't just there to provide information.
So what was it doing?
Well, he described words as disguises, as clues, like you might find in a Sherlock Holmes mystery.
Oh, wow, like a puzzle.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
They might be present as shapes on the surface part of the visual composition, rather than just to convey a specific message.
So playing with language?
He was. And it reminds me of Tom Wolfe's argument in The Painted Word, where the theory surrounding art sometimes becomes more important than the art itself.
All right.
And it seems like Camblin's playing with that dynamic.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different influences, but one that keeps coming up is Zen Buddhism and Eastern philosophy.
Yes. We even see it in the title of the book, Zen and the Art of Enlightenment. So let's dig into how this manifests, especially in relation to his watercolor New Orleans Mass, #31.
Okay, let's take a look.
So this piece depicts an energetic figure against a vibrant green background, wearing what appears to be a mask, or maybe a tribal headdress.
Okay, I can picture that.
And the clothing is done in these warm, fiery colors.
Yeah.
The brush strokes are really expressive, and the lines have this flow to them suggesting movement.
I see it.
And the analysis we have connects this to the Zen concept of no mind or mushin.
Which is about being present and free from attachment.
Exactly. And the weightless, fluid movement of the figure can be seen as representing that idea.
That makes sense. And the green background symbolizing nature reinforces that Zen emphasis on harmony with the natural world.
It does. And then the mask can be interpreted as representing those temporary identities we all adopt.
While the dance itself becomes a metaphor for embracing the impermanence of life.
It's beautiful, really.
It is.
And it's interesting how this analysis also links the watercolor to the I Ching,
Oh, really?
specifically hexagram 59 dispersion, which is about dissolving rigid structures and fostering unity.
And hexagram 61, inner truth, representing harmony and connection to one's inner self.
Yeah, the figure's motion can be seen as breaking down barriers, encouraging fluidity and change.
Aligning with I Ching's message of being truthful and moving with life's rhythms.
Right, and the Tao Te Ching also feels relevant here, with its celebration of the natural flow of existence.
Yeah, that idea that the greatest motion arises from stillness resonates with the figure's dynamic yet effortless movement.
And those vibrant colors evoke the vitality of life, while the mask hints at that interplay between essence and appearance, which is a big theme in the Tao Te Ching.
So this painting really is a fascinating intersection of different philosophical traditions.
It is exploring these themes of freedom, transformation, and harmony.
It makes
Cool.
you wonder about the artistic influences, too. The style and those colors suggest connections to modern expressionism and abstract art.
Definitely. And the mask or headdress hints at an interest in primitivism and indigenous cultures, maybe even ritualistic dance or shamanistic themes.
Right, it all points to Camblin's wide-ranging interests and how he brought these different elements together.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up, let's talk about Camblin's later life and his legacy.
Yeah.
So in 1976, he makes this radical decision to leave academia and embrace a nomadic life fully dedicated to his art.
Wow, what prompted that?
Well, his writings revealed this really strong conviction in the artist as a free agent, someone not bound by obligations unless they choose to be.
So it was about freedom.
It was. He supported his travels and his art through sales and commissions, drawing inspiration from the places and cultures he encountered.
Sounds like an amazing but challenging way to live.
It does. And his writings also provide some insight into his critique of the art world, his views on galleries and museums, his resistance to painting for money.
So he was critical of the art establishment.
He was. He saw limitations in the traditional ways art was presented and valued, and he wanted a more direct and holistic connection between the artist, the artwork, and the viewer.
Okay, I can see that.
So we've covered a lot about Camblin's life, his artistic philosophies, and the recurring themes in his work, but his body of work is vast and kind of scattered.
So there's still a sense of mystery?
There is. And it makes it harder to fully grasp his legacy.
Especially since his work is rarely available for purchase.
That's true. That scarcity definitely adds to the mystique. But it's clear from the critical acclaim he received throughout his career that his impact was significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have these really insightful quotes from people who knew him and his art. Like Pete Gershon, who describes Camblin as a mystical trickster figure ripe for rediscovery.
That's a great description.
It is. And George O. Jackson Jr. talks about reading his art almost like a book. And Earl Staley, his close collaborator, remembers him as a creative powerhouse and a mentor.
It sounds like Staley had a really special connection with him.
He did.
Yeah.
And his reflections offer this really personal and vivid glimpse into Camblin's world. He talks about their shared studios, BD Productions, and the holding firm, their collaborative projects, and Camblin's eventual disappearance from the Houston art scene.
Disappearance.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly what happened, but he seems to have just drifted away.
Huh. Adding to that mystique.
It does. And Staley paints this amazing picture of Camblin's studio as a wizard's den, filled with all sorts of strange and outrageous objects.
That sounds incredible.
It does. And then there's this Mr. Peanut persona that Camblin sometimes adopted.
Mr. Peanut?
Yeah, it's this playful anonymity he sometimes embraced. It makes you wonder about its significance in relation to his ideas about artistic identity.
I'd love to know more about that.
Me too. And it's great to hear about the recent efforts to organize exhibitions of his work, indicating a continued interest in his legacy and a desire to share his art with a wider audience.
That speaks to the enduring power of his vision.
It does. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's clear that Bob Camblin was a truly unique voice in the art world. He explored these profound themes, metamorphosis, illusion, paradox, through this incredible range of styles and mediums.
And his work continues to challenge us to question our perceptions and the very nature of reality.
It does. So for you, the listener, take a moment to consider the ideas and themes we've explored today. Think about the nature of perception, the interplay between what we see and what lies beneath that balance between our individual selves and our connections to others, and that acceptance of the ever-changing nature of things that seems so central to Camblin's work.
And maybe even consider the masks that you wear in your own life and how you navigate this ongoing dance of existence.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder. Given Camblin's deliberate use of ambiguity and those hidden layers of meaning, what single piece of his work would you be most drawn to spend time with, to really try and decode it? And what do you suspect you might discover about yourself in that process?
That's something to think about.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep looking, keep thinking, and keep exploring.
And maybe we'll see you again soon for another deep dive.
We hope so.
Bye.